Imagine the shock of a
take a
man
look
who
at
is
this.
everything, wealth beyond measure, power that shapes empires.
It's all
Only to
falling
discover that the one
apart!
sanctuary
What do you mean?
he cherishes most
The deal is off!
crumbling
We
from
have to
within.
go now!
This is the
Madness.
tale of Alexander Voss, a billionaire whose unannounced return home unveiled a betrayal so profound, it shattered the facade of his perfect life. But as you'll see, this isn't just a story of deceit. It's a riveting journey of resilience, hidden truths, and the unbreakable bonds that money can't buy. Alexander Voss had built his fortune from the ground up, turning a small tech startup into a global conglomerate that revolutionized artificial intelligence. At 45, he was the epitome of success, sharp-suited, impeccably groomed, with a piercing gaze that could close deals worth billions. His wife, Isabella, was his perfect counterpart, or so the world thought. A former model turned socialite, she glided through high society events with effortless grace, her beauty as calculated as her ambitions. They lived in a sprawling mansion overlooking Pacific, a palace of marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and secrets whispered in the shadows. But at the heart of this opulent world was Alexander's mother, Elena, once a vibrant woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her son alone after his father's early death. Elena now sat confined to a wheelchair, her body paralyzed from a stroke 5 years prior. Alexander adored her, ensuring she had the best care, a private wing in a mansion filled with books, art, and memories. "She's the reason I'm here," he'd often say, his voice softening in a way it never did in boardrooms. That fateful evening, Alexander decided to surprise them. His business trip to Tokyo had wrapped up early, a rare merger falling through at the last minute. Instead of announcing his return, he boarded his private jet in secrecy, eager to see the joy on his mother's face, and perhaps rekindle the spark with Isabella, whose affections had grown distant lately. As the limo pulled up the estate under the cover of dusk, the house lights glowed warmly, but an uneasy silence hung in the air. He entered quietly through the side door, his footsteps muffled on the plush carpet. Voices drifted from the east wing, Elena's wing. One was his mother's, frail but defiant, the other, Isabella's, sharp and commanding. Curiosity turned to alarm as he crept closer, peering through the cracked door. There she was, Isabella, her designer dress hugging her figure like armor, towering over Elena's wheelchair. In her hand, a stack of papers, legal documents, from the look of it. "You don't belong here anymore, old woman," Isabella hissed, her voice laced with venom. "This is my house now. Sign this, and you'll be out by morning, some nursing home where you can rot away without dragging us down." Elena's eyes, wide with hurt, met Isabella's glare. Alexander would never allow this. "He's my son." "Your son?" Isabella laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "He's my husband, and he's tired of playing nursemaid. Do you know how much your care costs? The parties we can't host because of your condition? Sign it, or I'll make sure you regret it." Alexander's blood ran cold. He watched in disbelief as Isabella thrust the pen toward his mother, her free hand gripping the wheelchair's armrest threateningly. Elena's hands trembled, but she refused, pushing the papers away. "I raised him when there was nothing. You won't take that from me." Just as Isabella raised her voice to shout for staff, hired help she had clearly manipulated, Alexander burst through the door. "What the hell is going on here?" Isabella whirled around, her face paling to the color of the marble floors. "Alex, darling, you're home early." This isn't what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. The documents scattered across the floor revealed everything. A petition to declare Elena incompetent, arrangements for her immediate relocation to a distant facility, and worse, evidence of Isabella siphoning funds from Alexander's accounts to fund her lavish lifestyle, all while plotting to remove the one person who could expose her greed. Alexander's mind raced. How long had this been brewing? Isabella had always been ambitious, but this, betraying his mother, the woman who had given him everything? He knelt beside Elena, taking her hand gently. "Mother, are you all right?" She nodded weakly, tears glistening. "I tried to tell you, son. She's not who you think." Isabella stammered. "It's for the best, Alex. She's a burden. We could travel, live freely." "A burden?" Alexander's voice thundered, echoing through the halls. He stood, facing his wife with a fury he reserved for corporate rivals. She's family. You're the one who's been lying, stealing. I trusted you. As the confrontation escalated, hidden layers began to peel away. Isabella wasn't acting alone. She had allies, Alexander's own business partner, who had promised her a cut of the company if she cleared the path for a hostile takeover. And Elena, far from helpless, had been quietly gathering proof of Isabella's affairs and financial manipulations, using her sharp mind to protect her son from afar. But just as Alexander reached for his phone to call his lawyers, a knock echoed at the door. It was the head of security, his face grim. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent, about your mother." Alexander froze. Who could it be at this hour? As he opened the door, a figure stepped into the light. A man he hadn't seen in decades, claiming to be Elena's long-lost brother, with documents that had changed everything about their family history. The man who stepped into the foyer was tall, whether by time and sun, his silver hair cropped close, and his eyes the same stormy gray as Elena's. He carried a worn leather satchel slung over one shoulder and held himself with the quiet certainty of someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side. Behind him, 2 private security men in dark suits waited discreetly on the porch, their presence confirming this was no casual visitor. "Alexander Voss?" the stranger asked, voice low and measured, carrying the faint cadence of someone who had spent years abroad. Alexander's grip tightened on the phone still in his hand. "Who are you?" "Marcus Reyes, your mother's younger brother." He glanced past Alexander toward the east wing, where Isabella still stood frozen, documents clutched her chest like a shield. "I see I arrived at an interesting moment." Elena's wheelchair rolled forward a few inches. The soft hum of its motor was the only sound for several heartbeats. "Marcus." Her voice cracked on the name, disbelief warring with something deeper. Hope, perhaps, or the ghost of old pain. "They told me you were dead. The accident in Cartagena, the embassy said..." They lied. Marcus stepped fully into the light. Or rather, they were persuaded to lie. It was easier that way, for everyone involved. His gaze flicked to Isabella again, colder now, especially for people who prefer inconvenient relatives to disappear. Alexander felt the room tilt. "Explain." "Now." Marcus set the satchel on the entry table and opened it with deliberate calm. He withdrew a thick envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed with wax that had long since cracked. Birth certificates, hospital records, DNA results run in Geneva 3 months ago. Elena and I share the same mother. Our father was complicated. He had money, connections, and a habit of making problems vanish. When I was 22, I got too close to some of his business dealings. A car went off a cliff. The official story was I died. The unofficial story was I was paid to stay gone. I took the money, changed my name, built a new life in Lisbon. But I never stopped watching. Watching what? Alexander demanded. Watching her. Marcus nodded toward Elena, making sure no one hurt the sister, who refused to abandon me when everyone else did. I kept tabs through private channels, old contacts, encrypted accounts. When your wife started moving money and meeting with a state lawyer 6 months ago, the alerts came straight to me. Isabella laughed, the sound brittle. "This is absurd. You expect us to believe some long-lost uncle shows up with fairy tale documents the exact night. The exact night you decided to force an elderly woman out of her home?" Marcus cut in smoothly. "Yes. Timing can be inconveniently precise when someone's been monitoring bank wires, phone records, and security camera feeds for years." Alexander's jaw clenched. He turned to his mother. "You knew he was alive?" Elena's eyes shimmered. "I suspected. For a long time I refused to believe he was gone, but the evidence, it was overwhelming." Letter stopped. The embassy closed the file. "I mourned him." She reached out. Her hand trembled as it touched Marcus's sleeve. "I mourned you." Marcus covered her hand with his own. "I'm sorry, El. I thought staying away kept you safe. I was wrong." The moment hung fragile between them, until Isabella's voice sliced through it. "Touching. Really. But none of this changes the fact that Elena is a financial drain and a liability. Alexander, be reasonable. You run a multi-billion-dollar company. You can't afford. Enough. Alexander's tone was steel. He faced his wife fully. You forged documents to declare my mother incompetent. You diverted funds, my funds, to offshore accounts I'm only now seeing reference in these papers. You've been sleeping with Daniel Hargrove, my CFO, for at least 8 months. And tonight you tried to intimidate a paralyzed woman into signing away her home. Tell me again how I'm supposed to be reasonable. Isabella's composure cracked. You have no proof. I have server logs, timestamp transfers, hotel security footage Hargrove's assistant was kind enough to forward after I doubled her severance package this afternoon, Alexander said quietly. I didn't come home early because the merger failed. I came home because I finally listened to the quiet warnings I've been ignoring for too long. He turned to Marcus. You said you've been watching. How much do you know? Enough to bury her twice over, Marcus replied. But I didn't come for revenge. I came because Elena asked me to, indirectly. She sent a single encrypted message 3 weeks ago through an old Dropbox we used as kids. One line, if anything happens to me, find my brother. I flew in yesterday. Elena exhaled shakily. I didn't want to burden you, Alexander, but I saw the papers on her desk. I saw the calls. I knew I couldn't fight her alone. Alexander knelt again, eye level with his mother. You never had to fight alone. Not then. Not now. Isabella took a step backward. This is blackmail. You're all conspiring. No, Marcus said. This is consequence. He pulled another folder from the satchel and placed it on the table. Civil suit for elder abuse and financial exploitation. Already drafted and ready for filing at dawn. Criminal complaint for fraud and attempted coercion. Supported by 6 months of surveillance. And a very interesting conversation recorded last month between you and Mr. Hargrove, in which you discuss how best to accelerate Elena's decline. Alexander's stomach turned. Accelerate. Marcus met his gaze evenly. They discussed switching medications. Subtle. Deniable. Enough to make the doctors conclude natural progression. The room went deathly quiet. Isabella's face drained of color entirely. Alexander rose, slowly. Get out. Alex. Get out of my house. Each word was a hammer strike. Security will escort you to the guest cottage. You will remain there until my attorneys arrive tomorrow morning. Try to leave the property, and the police will be waiting at the gate. Isabella's eyes darted between them. Alexander's unyielding stare, Marcus's calm certainty, Elena's quiet, unbreakable dignity. For the first time, real fear flickered across her features. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned on her heel and walked out, heels clicking furiously against marble. The front door closed behind her with a soft, final sound. Alexander exhaled, shoulders dropping for the first time in what felt like years. He looked at Marcus. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Marcus said. There's more. Hargrove isn't acting alone. Your board has been quietly buying shares through proxies for the last quarter. They think you're distracted. They think Elena's situation makes you vulnerable. They're planning a vote to remove you as chairman at the next quarterly meeting. Alexander's laugh was short and bitter. Of course they are. But they don't know about me, Marcus continued. And they don't know what Elena has been doing while everyone assumed she was just sitting here. Elena lifted her chin, a spark of the old fire returning to her eyes. I may not be able to walk, but my mind still works. For 2 years, I've been reviewing every quarterly report, every contract, every email forward your assistant thought were harmless. I built a parallel archive, timestamps, annotations, proof of insider trading, kickbacks, falsified projections. It's all on an encrypted drive hidden in the library, behind the false panel in the Montaigne collection. Alexander stared at her. Mother, I protected you once when there was nothing, she said softly. I never stopped. Marcus smiled, the first genuine one since he'd arrived. She's always been the smartest one in the room. Alexander looked between them, his mother, fierce and unbroken. The uncle he never knew he had, carrying decades of loyalty in a battered satchel. Something shifted inside him, a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying until it began to lift. "We're going to need coffee," he said, "and lawyers, and probably a lot of both before sunrise." Marcus nodded. "I brought my own lawyer. She's waiting in the car with 3 boxes of evidence and a very aggressive filing strategy." Elena's lips curved. "Then let's get to work." As the 3 of them moved toward the library, Alexander pushing his mother's chair, Marcus walking beside them, the mansion no longer felt like a mausoleum of secrets. It felt like a fortress. Waking up, outside, the Pacific rolled on, indifferent to the storm that had just broken inside the walls. But inside, alliances long buried were rising again, and the people who had tried to tear this family apart were about to learn exactly how dangerous it could be to underestimate the ones who had already survived worse. Alexander paused at the library doors and looked back at the entryway where Isabella had stood only minutes earlier. Then he pushed the doors open, letting warm light spill across the threshold. The real fight, he realized, was only beginning. The library transformed into a war room as the first hints of dawn bled across the Pacific horizon. Bookshelves that had once held only leather-bound silence now cradled laptops, legal briefs, encrypted drives, and 3 people who refused to let betrayal define their ending. Alexander sat at the long mahogany table, sleeves rolled to the elbows, eyes burning from lack of sleep, yet sharper than they had been in years. Elena's wheelchair was positioned beside him like a throne. She reviewed documents with the same meticulous focus she once used to balance household budgets on scraps of paper when Alexander was a boy in patched jeans. Marcus paced slowly behind them. Phone pressed his ear, speaking in clipped Portuguese to a contact in Lisbon who specialized in unraveling offshore trusts. By 7 a.m., the first domino fell. Alexander's personal attorney, Victoria Lang, arrived with a team of 4 associates and a rolling cart stacked with redacted filings. She listened to the story without interruption, then placed a single sheet in front of Alexander. A temporary restraining order against Isabella, freezing every account she had touched in the last 18 months. "We filed this in 30 minutes, Victoria said. "The judge owes me a favor from the last election cycle. She'll sign before her morning coffee cools." Elena looked up from the screen. "And Daniel Hargrove?" Victoria smiled thinly. "We already have a forensic accountant tracing every dollar he moved through shell companies in the Caymans. By noon, the SEC will have an anonymous tip package so airtight they'll issue a hold on trading Voss Technology stock before the opening bell. Hargrove won't be able to sell a single share without tripping alarms." Marcus ended his call. "My people in Europe just confirmed the wire transfers Isabella made to a private villa in Cap Ferrat. The deed is in her name. Purchased 3 weeks after your last board meeting, Alexander." She was already planning her exit. Alexander leaned back, letting the weight of it settle. Not rage this time, clarity. She thought I was too busy building the future to notice the present crumbling. Elena reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. The skin was thin, spotted with age, yet the grip was surprisingly strong. "You were building something beautiful, my son." She wanted to live in it without paying the price. At 8:45, security escorted Isabella from the guest cottage to the front gates. She wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky, a cashmere coat draped over her arm like armor she no longer needed. Alexander watched from the upstairs balcony as she climbed into the waiting black SUV. She didn't look back. He didn't expect her to. By 10, the boardroom of Voss Technologies was on emergency video conference. Alexander appeared on screen from the library, Elena visible in the background, reading quietly, Marcus standing just off-camera like a sentinel. The chairman's gavel hadn't even struck before Alexander spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have spent the last 12 hours learning exactly how deep the rot is spread. Daniel Hargrove is no longer employed by this company. Effective immediately, I am exercising my rights under the shareholder agreement to call a special meeting next week. At that meeting, I will present evidence of coordinated insider trading, fiduciary breach, and conspiracy to defraud. Any director who has been complicit will be named. Any director who wishes to resign before then may do so quietly. The rest will face civil and criminal liability. Silence stretched across the digital grid of faces. One by one, 3 board members logged off without a word. The others stayed, suddenly attentive. Alexander continued, voice steady. This company was never built on shortcuts or secrets. It was built on a promise my mother made to me when I was 12, and we had nothing. That hard work and honesty would always outlast greed. I intend to keep that promise. If you're still on this call, prove to me you want to keep it too. He ended the meeting without waiting for replies. That afternoon, news broke in waves. First a restraining order, then Hargrove's abrupt leave of absence, then the freeze on suspicious accounts. By evening, financial anchors were speculating about a family crisis at Voss Technologies, but the stock, after an initial dip, began to climb. Investors smelled strength, not scandal. They were right. Weeks turned into months. Isabella's civil suit was settled quietly out of court for an amount large enough to ensure she never spoke publicly about the Voss family again. Hargrove faced federal charges. His plea deal included full cooperation and a very long sentence. The board was cleansed in a single surgical vote. Alexander retained control, but he restructured the company charter to give Elena a permanent, non-voting seat on the ethics committee. Symbolic, perhaps, but a statement no one could ignore. Marcus stayed. He moved into the West Wing, the one that overlooked the rose garden Elena had planted 30 years earlier. He and Elena spent mornings together. Coffee, old stories, laughter that echoed through rooms long silent. Alexander watched them from the hallway sometimes, marveling at how grief could be rewritten into something warmer. One crisp October evening, Alexander wheeled Elena onto the terrace. The sun was setting in fire across the water, painting the sky in colors too vivid to be real. Marcus joined them, carrying a bottle of vintage port Elena had saved since Alexander's college graduation. Elena lifted her glass. "To second chances," she said. Alexander touched his glass to hers. "To the ones who never gave up on the first one." Marcus smiled, eyes on the horizon. "To family, the kind you choose, the kind that chooses you back, and the kind that shows up when the storm hits hardest." They drank in silence, the only sound the soft lap of waves and the distant cry of gulls. Alexander looked at his mother, then at the man who had crossed oceans to keep a promise made decades ago. He thought of the mansion that had once felt like a cage of marble and glass, and how it now felt like something else entirely, a home rebuilt not with money, but with loyalty fierce enough to survive betrayal. Later, when the stars came out and Elena had been helped to bed, Alexander stood alone on the terrace. He pulled his phone from his pocket and opened the company's internal messaging app. His thumb hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before he typed a single line to every employee. "Thank you for believing in what we build. Tomorrow, we start again, better, stronger, together." He hit send. Then he slipped the phone back into his pocket, turned his face to the night wind, and, for the first time in years, breathed like a man who knew exactly where he belonged. The Pacific kept rolling, ancient and unhurried. Inside the mansion, lights glowed in every window. Somewhere upstairs, Elena dreamed of the brother she thought she'd lost. Somewhere down the hall, Marcus planned tomorrow's walk and garden.